Welcome to Books on Point. The world faces a giant storm of stress and burnout that has been exacerbated in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic and the fourth industrial revolution. Learning how to navigate the world going forward is something that everyone has to do. With this background, how can leaders help themselves, their employees and their businesses to thrive in the face of these and other challenges? The book Stressproof speaks to the crisis currently facing the professional landscape. For more, we're joined by author Richard Sutton. Richard, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
So we've had you on the show last year to talk about your book, The Stress Code. What prompted you to write this one called Stressproof?
Well, the Stress Code, it was a very interesting journey. It was a journey into self-development and self-mastery during difficult times. But what I learned during that research project was that so much of the stress that we're confronted with can be buffered and almost eradicated by the people around us and the organizations that we work for. And that really was the genesis for putting this book together and really the passion that I threw into it for the last year.
I found chapter 2 quite interesting. I mean, you give examples of some of the positive human developments and successes, but we're still in that the context where there's a lot happening in the world, adding to a lot of that growing societal chronic stress. I mean, what can we do in the workplace environment to be able to alleviate some of those challenges?
So what you're referring to now is the fact that there's a tremendous amount of employment insecurity. We've got economic downturn. We've got a lot of individuals experiencing loneliness because of the current work conditions. There's health insecurity because of COVID. You've got the future of jobs is in question for a variety of different reasons, financial pressures, skills instability, and the list goes on and on and on. Fundamentally, these are the challenges of our time and are not likely to shift, move, or disappear anytime soon. But what these elements do, or these factors create, is certain types of stress, a feeling of lack of support, a feeling of a lack of control, a feeling of injustice, a feeling of an effort-reward imbalance. And those are the stresses that essentially stem from these bigger societal issues. And those are the things that we can control.
Right. You talk about mental health in South Africa, which is, a topic and theme I find quite fascinating. And you mention a stat here from SADC, which is the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, that reads that as many as 1 in 6 South Africans suffer from anxiety, depression, and some sort of addictive issue. What concerns you about this figure? And in the context of the pandemic, are you finding that corporates are starting to understand the mental health burden, or do we still have a long way to go?
I think that everyone, COVID has been this really broad and sweeping recalibration of society and value systems. And I think that companies are already standing up and noticing the bigger implications. And according to SADC, I mean, a lot of those statistics are also underplayed or downplayed. I think that they're considerably high at this point in time. There's been some research in organizational context where it's almost 1 in 4 individuals were suffering with depression. And if you look at the state of depression, by definition, it's lasting, sad, anxious, or empty mood, loss of interest in almost all activities, appetite and weight changes, ongoing feelings of worthlessness and guilt, and the list goes on and on. It's really impactful in terms of organizational potential, organizational culture, and success on both an individual and broader organizational level. Now, I think that, from the standpoint of the human cost and the economic cost, companies are standing up and taking notes. I think that depression alone, this is pre-COVID figures that I'm citing now, was costing the South African economy about $14.8 billion a year in lost productivity in the workplace. So I think that there are certainly measures in place in many organizations to try and deal with this growing challenge, this growing societal challenge.
Speaking of that, a lot of workplaces do have wellness programs, and when I read this particular chapter, it made me smile because some wellness programs unfortunately don't work and they fail. How do you come together as a corporate to re-look at what's working and what's not working? I mean, what should be the measurements or criteria you use?
So certainly data analytics is where you're going to be able to assess and quantify this most successfully. Within the context of wellness programs, the traditional paradigm was very reactive. Once individuals have succumbed to the adverse effects of stress, mental health, emotional health, cognitive health, behavioral, whatever the translation or materialization form is, a lot of organizations had teams in place and strategies in place to help individuals cope and overcome the challenges that they were experiencing and are experiencing. So this is one model, this reactive model that has been critically looked at, and the research is not overly positive if that's your sole method of intervention. There's also now a lot of exploration into equipping teams, into the method of equipping teams with critical knowledge and relevant tools and vital resources that help protect them from getting into that negative state physically, emotionally, or cognitively. But by far the most effective health initiatives, and this is according to an extensive research paper published by a team of Australian researchers that span 15 years and 90 different studies. Basically, the most effective wellness programs are those programs that are able to prevent the stresses from really entrenching themselves or inculcating themselves into the workplace and into the workforce.
All right, Richard, unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Of course, that is Richard Sutton talking about his book, Stressproof, The Game Plan. Of course, you can also pick up a copy of a book he published last year called Stress Code.